it was so cold at 28,000 feet in the sky that we had to wear heated suits. This is a boot with a little electrical circuit in it. And here is a, you want to hold that for, don't put it on. And here's the way we dressed. I don't know if you can see that from there. Long winter underwear, a heated suit, this bootie that we clip on, our sleeves, our jackets, everything. We had a parachute and a parachute harness and flak. There, this is solid steel. We weighed about 75 pounds. We were dressed up like a monkey up there. Every movement was a measured movement, and you never knew what was going to happen. And so I had the best view in the aircraft, even though it's the tail back there, and it looks like it's pinched in. That's this little. Let's see here. Hello.
Are you making fun of me?
Let's dance.
No.
That other one. Yeah. That's the way I get my exercise. There are the little girls. Did I tell them about the little girls? No. You know, when we got off the boat in Italy, I was stationed in Italy. We went down the gangplank, and Hitler had ordered Naples destroyed because Mussolini walked away from the war. And he said, destroy the city of Naples. And the harbor had locomotives poking out of the water. When we went down the gangplank, there was a ship down there on its side. And we walked right over on the gangplank. And there were 4 or 5 little girls, and they were smiling, lice in their hair, dirty cotton suits, dresses that were all busted up, and they were smiling. The soldiers were giving them candy bars, and they didn't, and cigarettes. They didn't smoke. So they gave those to their moms because they could use it as a coin of the realm and sell them for money. They were in desperate needs of things like that. And I think about these little girls, lice in their hair, smiling, and I look out at you guys and the teachers and the lady that brought me here in a free country because of what they did for us. And right now, let's give them a hand. We didn't know personally. Come on. Thank you. You know, when you're up there and you're watching these things happen, it's kind of impersonal because you don't know. And the guys that you trained with, if you lost them, it really was hard. I remember one day, we bombed a target. We were on the way home. We were no longer in harm's way. We were close to our base. We didn't have to worry about fighters or flak. And I looked out, and the sky was blue, and the sun was shining, and there were billowy clouds down below. And suddenly, to my attention, I saw a stream of smoke going down, and a ball of fire right below it. And I had a sight. I could kind of pick it out a little bit, but I couldn't see if any parachutes got it. It was a ship that had exploded. And I don't know who got out. I couldn't tell. It was too far away. But I think about that. And I think about somewhere in America, a lady was on the clothesline hanging up her clothes and talking to the neighbor lady. And she's saying, Ruby, you know, I think that Johnny's going to be home for Christmas. He wrote it in his last letter. He can't write everything. Johnny was in that plane. She'll get a telegram instead. The telegrams came when they lost somebody, or they're wounded, or they're in a hospital, and all that sort of stuff. So she'll find out the hard way. You know, you saw that fire, an explosion, everything that was going on up there in the film. I went to the hospital. My guys, and some of them were in serious condition. And the navigator, the engineer was in the hospital bed. And there was a nurse at bedside with a paper and pencil. And he was dictating a letter to her. And it said, "Dear Mom, don't worry about all these telegrams that you're going to get about me being hurt." He said, "My secretary's writing this letter for me." And he was in bad shape. He was all bandaged up. And he turned to me and he said, "Parker, they're talking about President Truman. Roosevelt's the president." I said, "South, we crashed the day Roosevelt died. And you're listening to your new president." And he was a real hero. There are 10 guys in the B-17. And they're all gone now. But they're, I can even talk from behind here. I'll get this out. So anyway, I'm looking for a miniature little B-17 in here. That's probably it. Let's see. There it is. Our plane was a little bit bigger than this. And my job was back here. And the day that we came in to crash, and the ship was on fire, and explosions everywhere, I went out the side of the plane, out on the runway, and the runway was on fire, and shells of ours were exploding, and oxygen bottles, and I ran around behind the B-17, and South was there, my engineer, and his skin on his fingers were hanging down, and we all had heinies in those days, because we wore oxygen masks. Oh, I just got shot down. Bring me. Well, end of story. So, where was I? Before I got shot, I didn't bail out. I never had to bail out. I came close to it a few times. I had my own escape hatch. And I would go to my escape hatch when the shells were exploding, never knowing for sure what might happen. And it happened so fast. Sometimes you'd be flying along, and one day, and I'm just going to jump around here. One day, we bombed a target called Hagen's Home. And I don't know if it was on there. In Yugoslavia. And what happened was the ship started to shake. I mentioned that in the film. And then it stopped shaking. Boom, boom, boom. And then the pilot called the cold. We landed in a pasture. And what happened? A propeller tore off one of these propellers and it sliced off the horizontal stabilizer right next to me. And I looked down and said, "Well, there's a piece that's gone. Where are we going to end up with this thing?" And when we landed, and he got a special award for that, the Distinguished Service Award. Clancy, my pilot. He was an Irish kid, and he was quiet, nice, and we revered the pilot. He's the guy that flew us there and got us back, and the navigator. And so anyway, I'm going to show you this. 40 years after the war, I got a phone call from a guy. He said, "You know, I was a photographer for the group." And he said, "One day I looked out on the runway and there was a whole bunch of fires out there. You were in that fire. That was the plane, and I have motion pictures of it." I said, "You do? That's history. Nobody will ever see that unless you give, I'll send you a copy," and that's what you were seeing. I don't think you'll ever see that in any other publication. Because I have it, and I've showed it in groups like this, but that was a terrible fire. My pilot destroyed all those aircraft, and my engineer, my navigator, 40 years after the war, I got a call, and the guy said, "This is Goonie." I said, "A lot of my friends are Goonie." And he said, "I said you died in that plane crash. They hauled you away. You were toast." He said, "The rumors of my death are greatly exaggerated." He said, "I was in the hospital for months, in and out. One day a Russian kid laid down beside me and gave me blood. He said, 'Now I'm a Russian Jew.'" So that inspired me to search for my crew. And I found 5 of my guys that I could put at my home out in Stillwater. I asked them to bring their journals and their everything, and I recorded them. And I've got CDs. I didn't have DVD, of stories that nobody would believe unless they heard it from the guy that did it. And living history right there. They did it. And once in a while I have to throw in the, and I'm standing here because they did it. And you're sitting there because they did it. And you know that. You're told that. I remember when I was 13 or 14, and there was a pretty girl that sat next to me, and I was kind of into myself, thinking about her. After all, that's the way the world is. And then you grow into the real world, and things change. And unfortunately, one war leads to the next one. But you know, I was during the, she told me, I think the Civil War, in the Depression, early Depression, I was about 6 years old, and I was up at the high school auditorium, and they called it Decorations Day in those days. They go out to the in First World War, they were honored. And there was a guy up there on the stage talking about freedom and commitment and duty. And up on the stage were 3 or 4 old guys in wooden chairs, beards and whiskers and old scratchy wooden, suits, wool suits, chain, a pocket watch, Civil War veterans. Here I am, talking to a group that's looking at a guy that was next to Civil War veterans that were still around. Now someday, when you guys are old, you can talk about this old guy that talked to our class. He knew Civil War veterans. Any questions? I like to answer. One of the questions okay.
When you were in the back of the plane, did you ever pray?
Did I ever pray? Okay, good question. When I was in the back of the plane, did I ever pray? 3 things helped me back there. Shells were exploding, ships were going down. 3 things. One of the things was we could talk to each other. And that made it easier because someone was with you. And the other thing was they knew I was, I didn't have to worry because I was the best tail gunner in the war. And if he came after me, I'd shoot him down. So that was the problem. And I had swastikas painted all over the back of the ship. When you shoot a ship down, you get a... I prayed. Yes, I prayed. Now, the Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. Yea, though I walk through the valley of death, and I surely was. That was the most common prayer, the 23rd Psalm. And I use that. Way back there, I see a hand.
How many ships did you take down?
How many missions?
How many ships did you take down?
Oh, how many ships did I take down? Well, I never had to fire my guns at an enemy aircraft. It was too dangerous. They found out early in the war to attack a B-17 at the tail. The reason it was, is they're coming out of the sky at 350 miles an hour on average, and the bomber is heading this way at 150 miles an hour. So they lose that 150 miles an hour. Now they're only doing 200. And they have to get within 300 yards of us to get a good shot. And we could shoot them down from the tail at 600 yards. So they changed their tactics. They began to come in on the nose of the bomber. And they'd aim at the pilot. And they'd take a couple shots, and then they would roll over them to gone. And most of the aircraft had body armor underneath. And only one guy could get a shot at him. And that's the guy that was flying in that little, down here in the ball. Ogle was his name. And everything happened so fast in the sky. Just really fast. You know, Ogle was next to the most handsome guy on the crew. You could tell who the real guy was. He got the Purple Heart in 1997. In that film up there that shows the plane, we're all sitting there, you couldn't see it, it's too small, and he had sutures all over his face. He was sitting in my lap at spoon style in the radio room, and when we crashed, the plane slammed into all the equipment you were next to it. His face was all cut up. We went out the door. The door opened, fortunately. I started running down the runway, and the B-17 was coming right at me, because we were right at the runway. You'll never meet anybody that had a B-17 chase them down the runway. That's not much of an honor. But and it went right over the top of me, and I turned and I ran into my radio guy who was right behind me, and I looked back. I couldn't believe what I was seeing. The carnage, explosions, oxygen bottles, ammunition. My waist gunner from Boston was on the ground and he couldn't get up, and the fire was all around him, and I ran back, and it was too heavy for me to pull. And by that time, the fire trucks were there. We were out of our own base. And the firemen told me, get out of here, and they grabbed him and they pulled him away from the fire, and he had some real problems, but you know, they're all gone now. And I'm the only one left of my crew.
You got two
And-
more questions.
Huh? Oh, okay.
You can finish your sentence.
Okay. Go ahead, young lady.
Who was the oldest and youngest members of your crew?
What'd you say?
Who's the oldest and youngest people on your crew?
I was the youngest one on the crew. And I'm the only one that's left, so it's only fair. And they're not gone. They're still with me. They're right here. And I can see them. And I'm with them. And that never changes. Yes, gentlemen.
When you dropped the bombs and you were flying over, could you hear them explode, or was the plane louder?
No, I tell you, it's a good question. What happened, there's 12 bombs in the bomber. And in the bomb bay, 6 of them on each side of the inside of the tummy of the ship. And they're sitting there, and there's a wire that goes through them. The nose fuse and a tail fuse. And when the bombardier up front turns the lever, the shackles open and the bombs drop down. And they have propellers on the nose and on the tail. And they have to rotate for about 500 revolutions or so many, depending on the target. And the propeller comes off, the bomb is armed, the nose of the bottom of the propeller. Now when that bomb hits the ground, it explodes. Or you may want to hit a building, and you may want it not to get through the building. So the fuse is set so that the minute it gets close to that bit, it might explode. So there's different techniques involved with that. Yes?
Have you seen a battleship go down?
You want to send that one down to me?
He wants to know if you saw a battleship go down while you were in the sky.
No, I didn't. You can see I'm a little hard of hearing. And no, I never saw a battleship go down. Young man?
How many medals had you got when you were in the military?
How many medals have I got?
I can't talk.
Yeah, Purple Heart, no. Good Conduct Medal, I don't know how I got that. The war, Bronze Star with a few, several of them. There's one back there.
Did you ever regret joining the war?
Did you ever regret joining the war?
Did I ever what?
Regret joining the war?
Did I ever?
Regret joining
Oh,
the war?
I thought you said eat grass. See what happens when you get old? See this little thing right here? That's a hearing aid. Yeah, and the way I can get it out is I can hit this side of my head. And I can get it out. It works every time. Now, did I ever regret it? What was that question again? I'm sorry.
Did you ever regret joining the war?
No, I didn't, because it was so necessary based on the circumstance. We didn't think about our leaders very much because we were too busy. But when I look back at all of this, I don't know I'm not sure that your grandma and grandpa would be here, or you would be here, of course. So, war is never good. It's for instance, Bud Riley came to me crying one day, and I think that might have been in the film. His sister came down and wanted to see him before he left for the war, which was fortunate. And he was crying. And he told me his sister would come down for the war. And I said, call your mother. I said, all she can do is bawl. They got married. Now Bud's co-pilot and he were in the same aircraft. The co-pilot survived that explosion up there. There's a kid from Minnesota who was in there in Redwood Falls. He survived. 3 guys got out of there. But anyway,
How many
How many times did your plane end up crashing?
Well, we crashed in Yugoslavia. We got out of it, but the bad crash was the one you saw here on the film. So I could probably say to you 2 times. The last time it took the plane away from us, and
Do you want me?
How many times? Did any of your crew members die during the war?
what do you say?
Did any of your crew members die during the war?
Any of
Your crew members die.
Any of my crew members died during the war? No, but they were in bad shape, some of them, based on the missions that happened.
In the video, it mentioned those black clouds were called flak. What is flak?
Oh, flak, that's a good question. Flak is shells that are exploding that the enemy sends up. And there's a good picture of it right there, right here. That's the way it looked. That was over Vienna. Incidentally, when the war was over there, that's a song. I went to the briefing room and I picked up a whole bunch of pictures that were discarded. And some of in the originals, and I had all of this stuff. There's the plane crash. I came back, well, the guy sent me that. So anyway, there's so many questions. Yes, young man.
Did you ever bomb on D-Day?
Did you bomb on D-Day?
No, that was after my, but I flew a mission on Christmas Day in Brooks. And the 25th of December, Brooks. And what would happen, as soon as we started down the bomb run, we come from out of here, but we had to bomb this target right there. So we had to turn in and fly towards it, and then all the flak was exploding all over the place. We drop our bombs, and we would rally off the target, but I was going somewhere, and I
Christmas. It's
ran into
Christmas.
trouble.
It's Christmas.
Well, Christmas, there I was, up there in the sky. And I would always wiggle past my ammunition boxes, and I'd put on my parachute and my body armor in case something happened. And it was Christmas Day, and the guy leading the group was a guy by the name of Fearless Joe Brensinger. We started on the bomb run, and I would listen for bomb bay doors open. Then I would hear bombs away, and the ship would rise. It was just as happy as we were, and then we'd rally off and go home. Well, I didn't hear bombs away. We went around again. And I was waiting now for bombs away. It didn't happen, and we went around again. We made 3 trips over that target. That's suicide. And I said, it had to be Brensinger. Well, after the war, I was down in Florida. I went bouncing all over the country trying to get out of the war. And there was Brensinger. It was a bar restaurant. I could tell his voice. He was a noisy officer. And he was a major now. And I walked over to him and I said, Major Brensinger. Yeah, Sergeant. I said, where were you Christmas Day, 19th? Were you there? Were you with me? He said, were you mad? I said, yeah, I was mad. We got home. The mess hall was closed. He said, buy the sergeant a drink. And we went to places in the sky that very few people have been. I'm just, let's have a lady in the back.
Betty, oh,
She's yawning.
okay.
Did you get drafted?
Did you get drafted?
Good point. No, when I quit my senior year, I went to work for Dad, and I was scalding hogs and butchering cows and could hardly wait to get in the war, like I mentioned. I enlisted. So I didn't get drafted.
Now your lovely lady here. Natalie.
Did you or anybody else on your team suffer from the post-traumatic
And?
disorder?
She's asking if you or any of your crew suffered from post-traumatic stress disorder.
My engineer might have. Of course, they didn't even have that term in those days. We didn't even know about that. But there were, I know that the answer is probably yes, but I don't know because we didn't define it then. We were all affected. I'm affected when I watch something that kind of relates to that period and like my guys, my crew members, these guys down here, I'm way over here on the end, on this picture down here. Clancy, the whole group. I can look at that. I look at it right now, and I see, there's my navigator who I really liked, who came to my house after the war. That's me back here, the good-looking guy. They always put him on the end. And south, Apache might have had that problem. South drank quite heavily. They gave us, did I tell you that they gave us 2 shots of whiskey after every mission? Did I mention that? No. Well, I didn't drink. I just got out of Sunday school. And so I had my,
No, you keep telling your story. I was
just
just
can't
gonna
resist me.
say, Molly has a question.
Okay, Molly.
Why did you choose to go in the war? Did you know someone who has fought before?
Why did you choose to go in the war? Did you know someone who had fought before?
When that bomb dropped on Pearl Harbor, everybody was together. Everybody was one. I had to go in. There's the enlistment, and then there's the draft, and then there was the guys went in from some of the other programs that we had. And that's the reason I had to go, because that was you were part of the program. So, and I was happy to go because I knew they needed me. And go ahead, young man.
What do you think was the most safe part of the plane?
What was the safest part of the plane?
Well, I don't know. They were all kind of dangerous. I think I might have had it up on them because I didn't have any competition on getting out. I can wiggle back a little ways and turn a handle and go out a door and be out in the sky. I didn't have to do it, fortunately. I came close a few times.
Jake has, oh, yeah, you can do.
When people would use a parachute to get out of the plane, did they ever get shot at?
Did people ever get shot at when they dropped out of a plane?
Yes, I didn't know any personal that happened to, but I'm not sure what the statistics are on that. I think sometimes, and it might be true, a German would come by and it'd be floating down, and maybe he'd spare you. It depends on his philosophy of the war and whether he has any.
Two more questions, and then you're gonna have, they gotta get back to class.
Oh, you gotta get, what class are we gonna go back to? I'll make this one about an hour, this answer, okay?
A young gentleman by the name of Finn has a question, and then Jake has a question.
Okay.
Finn and Jake.
Finn,
How many planes did you shoot
we asked that one already.
Yeah, we talked about that.
So, and then Jake, young man Jake has a question.
Hey, Jake?
Did any of the planes in your squadron get rammed into by an enemy fighter?
Did any of the planes in your squadron collide with an enemy fighter?
Not that I know of. Things were happening up there, and I didn't know who was in that plane or what squad was there or so forth. So it's hard to tell until you got back to the base. Then the whole word was out what was happening and what happened to some of the guys. And way back there for one of the last questions.
If World War III began when you were like 40, would you join?
If World War III happened, would you join?
Well, I would probably be too old. But if the B-17's gone now, there's about 3 or 4 that are still flying. We were talking about that. There's so much talk about what's right and what's wrong, what we should do this and do that, and our leadership and so forth. But our leadership is sitting right here. It really is. And we're proud of it. Every time I go out and make a presentation, this guy that's behind me talking, Clemens, he and I make speeches. He can't do it anymore because, way back there. Young lady.
If like the wars ended and there was another one that like began, would you join them?
Relay that.
It was a question that he says he's too old. She wanted to know if he would join a war again. So.
I probably wouldn't qualify, but I'd be happy to do what I could. And listen, the women weren't in the war, they weren't shooting bullets. Incidentally, I know now they can be soldiers. It's legal after some, just recently, which is okay, it makes sense. Everybody gets involved, and women played a major job during the war. And they still do.
We better sign out, we're over.
I want to thank you so much for inviting me, and for Ann, and so you guys are great.
Thank you very much. Thank you. What an honor. You can sit just for one last moment. I just heard something that I think it was FDR, Franklin Roosevelt said, and he said it in the form of talking to a man, but it's a woman also. You are born many men. And out of the series of choices that you make in your life, you become one man. Every time you say yes to something, you're saying no to something else. So use honor, faith, courage to make the choices to help you become that one man, that one woman at the end of your life that can be respected and honored, just like Staff Sergeant Parker. One hand, please, for
I've got my card here which shows the bomber, me sitting on the tail, so forth. There's enough of these, I think, for go around.
fantastic. Thank you, thank you, thank you.
And thanks again.
Absolutely.
Thank you.